Men will start treating you like a queen, I've spent a lot of time studying leadership, behavior, and human connection, and I've noticed something fascinating. We don't get what we want in life. We get what we believe we deserve. So when I hear someone say, "Why don't men treat me like a queen?" my question is always this: do you treat yourself like royalty first? See, most people start with what they want, what they think they deserve, what someone else should be doing. But let's start with why. Why should someone treat you like a queen? Not from a place of ego, but from a place of worth. Why should someone show you respect, loyalty, admiration? It starts not with them, it starts with you. There's a truth that quietly shapes every relationship we're part of, one that many people never fully realize. It's this: we teach people how to treat us. It's not something we do consciously. It happens in the small, seemingly insignificant moments, when we let something slide that made us uncomfortable, when we laugh off a disrespectful comment because we don't want to seem too sensitive, when we show up for others time and time again, even when they wouldn't do the same for us. Every time we do these things, we send a message, and it's not the one we think we're sending. We think we're being kind. We think we're being understanding, patient, generous. But from the outside, those same behaviors can look like a lack of boundaries, a lack of self-worth, or even a quiet plea for approval. That's not to say kindness or generosity are weaknesses. They are not. But when they're not rooted in self-respect, they can quickly become invitations for others to take more than they give. I once spoke to a young woman who was frustrated with how men were treating her. "They don't take me seriously," she said. "They're inconsistent, disrespectful, and I always end up giving more than I get." I asked her, "How do you treat yourself?" She looked confused. "What do you mean?" she asked, so I asked again, this time more specifically. "When you say yes, do you always mean it? Do you set limits and communicate your needs clearly? Do you walk away when someone crosses a line, or do you explain it away?" She was quiet for a moment, then she said, "I guess I've never really thought about that. And that's the heart of it. Every time we compromise our standards for the sake of connection, we're training people that will tolerate less than we deserve. Every time we excuse bad behavior, we're teaching others that we're okay with being treated that way. Every time we stay silent instead of speaking up, we're showing others that our voice doesn't need to be considered. It's not about blame. It's about awareness. Because the good news is this: just as we teach people to take us for granted, we can also teach them to treat us with respect, with care, with admiration. But the shift starts with us, not them. We can't wait for someone else to treat us like royalty while we treat ourselves like a servant. We can't demand to be seen as a queen while acting like a background character in our own life. When you start valuing your time, others do too. When you say no with confidence, people notice. When you stop over-explaining your choices, the world begins to take you more seriously. And when you choose to walk away from what doesn't serve you, you make space for something better to find you. It's not magic, it's alignment. It's about bringing your actions into sync with your worth, and it's not about being perfect. It's about being consistent. So if you've ever wondered why someone treats you a certain way, ask yourself, what have I taught them about me? The answers might surprise you, but more importantly, they'll empower you. Because the moment you realize that you have a say in how you're treated, the moment you understand that respect starts with how you carry yourself, you begin to reclaim your power. And from there, everything starts to change. We live in a world that often starts with what we want, what we expect, what we think we're owed. It's natural. When something isn't going right in our lives, especially in our relationships, we focus on the outcome we're not getting. I want a man who respects me. I want someone to treat me like a queen. I want to feel appreciated, seen, chosen. There's nothing wrong with wanting those things. In fact, they're beautiful human desires. But the problem starts when we stop there, when we get so focused on what we want that we forget to ask the most important question. Why? Why do you want to be treated like a queen? Why do you deserve respect, admiration, loyalty? Not in a defensive way, but in an intentional one. Because if you can't define why, if you can't root your desires in a deep understanding of your own worth, then what you want will always feel just out of reach. You'll chase the outcome without ever creating the foundation that makes it real. Most people think confidence is loud, but real confidence, the kind that quietly shifts a room, that demands respect without asking for it, comes from knowing your why. I once spoke to a woman who told me she was tired of being treated like she was just an option. She said she kept attracting men who weren't serious, who didn't value her time or her energy. I asked her, "What makes you worthy of being a priority?" She blinked as if no one had ever asked her that before. But this isn't about proving your worth to me or to anyone else. It's about knowing it for yourself. Because when you know why you're worthy of love, respect, and loyalty, your standards stop feeling like demands. They feel like extensions of who you are, and people can sense that. It's the difference between someone who says, "I deserve better," from a place of frustration, and someone who lives like they deserve better, calmly, consistently, with no need for justification. Your why is rooted in your values, your character, your integrity. It's in the way you love deeply, speak truthfully, support others, and carry yourself with grace. It's in your vision for your life and the kind of energy you bring into a room. When you own that, not with arrogance but with clarity, you no longer need to beg for respect. It becomes the natural response to your presence. When you start with why, everything shifts. You stop measuring your worth by how someone else treats you, and you start measuring others by how well they align with what you already know to be true about yourself. So if you want to be treated like a queen, ask yourself, why do I deserve that? And then answer with honesty, not with fluff, not with what you hope is true, but with the real substance of who you are and what you bring to the table. This isn't about ego. This is about alignment. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to demand to be respected. When your why is strong enough, your energy speaks for you. And that's when the world starts responding differently, not because they've changed, but because you have. It's not what you want that changes your life. It's why you believe you deserve it, and how you live in alignment with that belief every single day. That's where the power is. There's a common misconception about boundaries. People often associate them with walls, with distance, with rejection. But in reality, boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about showing people how to stay in your life in a healthy, respectful way. We think that if we say no, we'll seem cold. If we express our needs, we'll be too much. If we ask for space, we'll push people away. But the opposite is actually true. Boundaries are not the enemy of connection, they're the foundation of it. Respect doesn't happen by accident. It's earned, yes. But more importantly, it's taught. And boundaries are how we teach people to respect us. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you said yes when you really wanted to say no? When was the last time you made yourself smaller just to keep the peace? When was the last time you accepted behavior that made you feel unseen or unappreciated because you didn't want to seem difficult? Every time we override our own comfort to make someone else more comfortable, we're sending a subtle message. My needs are less important than yours. And over time, that message becomes the norm, not just for the other person, but for ourselves. I once met someone who was constantly frustrated in her relationships. She said, "I always give everything, and somehow I still end up feeling unimportant." And I asked her, "What do you say when someone crosses a line?" She hesitated. "I usually let it go." I don't want to seem dramatic, but here's the truth. Boundaries don't make you dramatic. They make you honest. When you clearly express what you're okay with and what you're not, you're giving people the opportunity to rise to your standard. You're not demanding. They're free to stay or go. But if they stay, they know what it takes to be close to you. That's how respect works. It's not about fear. It's about clarity. And something incredible happens when you start living with boundaries. You stop feeling drained all the time. You stop questioning your worth based on someone else's treatment. You stop over-explaining, over-apologizing, and overcompensating. Instead, you begin to feel aligned, calm, grounded. You know where you end and someone else begins. You protect your time, your energy, your values, not out of selfishness, but out of self-awareness. It's easy to think that love means giving endlessly, but real love, healthy love, requires balance, and that balance is built through boundaries. It's the ability to say, "I care about you, but I also care about me." It's the courage to say, "This doesn't work for me," even when it risks disappointing someone else. Because here's the thing, the people who truly value you will never be pushed away by your boundaries. In fact, they'll be drawn to them. Boundaries are a signal that you know your worth, that you live with intention, that you are not available for anything less than mutual respect. And that kind of clarity is magnetic. If you want to be treated like a queen, you have to act like one. And queens don't beg for love. They don't tolerate disrespect in the name of potential. They don't explain their standards, they embody them. So let your boundaries speak for you. Let them be the silent language that communicates I value myself, and not with anger, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. Respect isn't something you ask for, it's something you model, and boundaries are how you show the world what respect looks like. Starting with how you give it to yourself, that's where real power begins. There's a kind of strength that doesn't need to announce itself. It doesn't yell to be heard. It doesn't dominate a room. It doesn't perform. It simply exists, quietly, firmly, and unmistakably. That's the kind of confidence that leaves a lasting impact. Most of us were taught to associate confidence with being loud, with taking up space, with being the most seen, the most talked about, the one who always has something to prove. But real confidence doesn't need to prove anything. It's not a performance, it's a presence, and presence, true presence, is powerful. It's the way someone walks into a room without saying a word, and yet everyone notices. Not because of what they're wearing or how loud they are, but because of how grounded they are. They're not trying to be anything other than themselves. They're not seeking approval or attention. They simply are. I once observed a woman at a conference. She didn't speak often, but when she did, people leaned in. There was no rush in her voice, no need to dominate the conversation. But the moment she spoke, there was authority in her tone, not ego, authority. She didn't talk over others. She didn't try to impress anyone. But her presence was undeniable. That's the kind of confidence people remember because it's real, it's rooted, and that's the kind of presence that gets treated with respect. So many of us are taught to chase validation, to post more, to prove more, to show more, and while there's nothing wrong with expressing yourself, it becomes a trap when it's rooted in insecurity. When we feel the need to constantly prove our worth, it's usually because we haven't fully believed in it ourselves. But when you know who you are, when you've done the work to understand your values, your strengths, your vision, then you don't need to be loud. Your energy does the talking for you. There's something magnetic about someone who's calm in their skin, who doesn't chase approval, who doesn't shrink for anyone, but also doesn't need to puff up to appear strong. That's what people respond to. That's what earns quiet admiration in relationships, especially romantic ones. This is even more powerful. When a woman shows up with silent confidence, she's not looking to be completed. She's not begging to be chosen. She's already chosen herself. And in doing so, she naturally raises the bar for how she's treated. She isn't impressed by empty charm or temporary attention. She responds to consistency, depth, and emotional maturity. And that shifts the entire dynamic. When you carry yourself with quiet power, the wrong people will fall away. Not because you pushed them out, but because they were never meant to meet you at that level, and the right people, the ones who respect substance, not just surface, will lean in. That's why confidence isn't just about how you feel, it's about how you show up. It's the energy behind your words. It's in your posture, your tone, your eye contact. It's in how you hold your boundaries, how you handle silence, how you respond when things don't go your way. You don't have to compete to be seen. You don't have to shout to be heard. The most powerful people often say the least, but everything they say carries weight. Because when your confidence is real, when it's built from the inside out, you don't have to do anything extra. You just have to be. That's what presence is, and presence is power. The kind of people you attract into your life is rarely random. It's not just about who's around you, it's about who stays, and more often than not, that's a reflection of what you believe you deserve. We attract not what we want, but what we are aligned with. Many people don't realize this because we're taught to focus outward. We're told to make lists of what we want in a partner: successful, kind, loyal, emotionally available. But how often do we pause to ask, am I ready for the kind of person I'm asking for? It's not about perfection, it's about alignment. Because the truth is, you can only receive the kind of love you believe you're worthy of. Not on paper, not in theory, but deep down in your bones. When your self-worth is shaky, it's easy to confuse attention with affection. You'll hold on to inconsistency because it feels familiar. You'll settle for crumbs and call it a feast, not because you don't want more, but because a part of you isn't sure you truly deserve more. But when your self-worth is intact, when it's rooted in who you are, not in what someone else gives or withholds, Stop negotiating your value. You stop trying to convince people to choose you. You stop measuring your worth by how others treat you. Instead, you become more discerning. You become more centered. You start to recognize which connections drain you and which ones reflect the love you already give yourself. You realize that not every spark leads to a fire worth tending, and something powerful begins to happen. The moment you stop chasing people who don't value you, you create space for the ones who do. You begin attracting people who see your worth, not because you shouted it, but because you embody it, the ones who admire your standards instead of being intimidated by them, the ones who value depth over performance, consistency over games, presence over promises. It's not magic, it's clarity. I once spoke to a woman who said, "Every time I raise my standards, people start leaving my life." And I said, "That's not a loss. That's a filter." Because the truth is, when you live with self-worth, you stop fitting into spaces that were built for your insecure version. You no longer blend into environments that reward silence, people pleasing, or self-neglect. And that's a good thing. Self-worth doesn't make you hard to love, it makes you harder to manipulate. It doesn't close doors, it closes the wrong ones so the right ones can open. And those who are meant to walk with you will never be threatened by the way you love yourself. In fact, they'll be drawn to it. Because people who are healthy, people who are ready, are looking for someone who values themselves, not in a prideful way, but in a grounded, gracious way. You don't need to chase, you don't need to beg, you don't need to perform. The right people are already seeking someone exactly like the version of you who knows their worth. So don't lower your standards to match the energy around you. Rise, stand tall in who you are. Love yourself first, not as a strategy, but as a foundation. Because when you do, you become a magnet for the kind of love that doesn't require you to lose yourself in order to keep it. And that's when everything starts to change, not because you finally found someone, but because you finally found yourself. There's a quiet difference between someone who asks to be treated like a queen and someone who simply is. One is a request, the other is a reflection. One waits to be crowned, the other walks in knowing she already is. That's the thing about real power, it doesn't need to be announced. It's not something you put on like an outfit. It's something that radiates from within, built from the choices you make and the way you carry yourself, even when no one is watching. So often, we see people trying to earn love, earn respect, earn attention, and I understand that desire. We all want to be seen, but there's a big difference between earning someone's love and proving your worth. Queen energy isn't about being served, it's about being centered. It's not about control or dominance, it's about presence. You don't walk into a room and demand to be noticed. You walk in with such clarity of self that people naturally pay attention. Not because you raised your voice, but because your energy speaks before you do. But here's the key, that kind of energy doesn't come from external validation. It comes from how you see yourself in the mirror when no one else is looking. It comes from the way you speak to yourself in private, the way you honor your own boundaries, the way you hold yourself accountable without self-hatred, and celebrate yourself without needing applause. I once met a woman who never had to tell people she was powerful. She wasn't flashy. She wasn't loud, but when she spoke, people listened. When she said no, it wasn't up for debate. And when she loved, it was full, without losing herself. That's queen energy. It wasn't something she learned from a book or a motivational speech. It came from years of doing the inner work. From choosing herself over and over again, especially in moments when it was easier to settle. From healing parts of her that wanted to be chosen so badly. She would have tolerated almost anything. From deciding that her peace was more important than someone else's comfort. That's the kind of strength that doesn't just attract love, it attracts aligned love. Because when you embody queen energy, you no longer fall for potential. You look for patterns, you don't chase chemistry, you look for character. You stop settling for being tolerated and start seeking to be truly cherished, and not because you're playing hard to get, but because you are hard to replace. There is something deeply attractive about someone who doesn't need to be completed. Someone who is already whole, already sure, already steady. That energy isn't arrogant. It's inspiring. It creates a standard, and the people who are meant for you will rise to meet it, not because you demanded it, but because you demonstrated it. So no, you don't need to beg to be treated like a queen. You don't need to post quotes about your worth or shout your standards from the rooftop. You just need to become the version of yourself who already knows she is valuable, with or without anyone else's confirmation. The right people will recognize that, the wrong ones will fall away, but most importantly, you will recognize it, and when you see yourself clearly, when you carry yourself like someone who is already enough, life has a way of rising to meet you. Not because you were chasing anything, but because you finally stopped running from who you truly are. You don't demand queen energy, you embody it, and that's what changes everything.